which board to opt for, CBSE or Icsc? A very tricky question for most of the parents. So what we have here is a clear difference between CBSE and Icsc, based on your requirements, your flexibility, you can opt for. And then we would be talking about a calculated move and the pros and cons for both the boards. So let's first talk about medium. When it comes to CBSE, it offers both Hindi medium as well as English medium. However, with Icsc, you just have a choice for English medium. If you are thinking about appearing as a private candidate, you have an option for CBSE, but with Icsc, there is no other option but to be enrolled as a regular student with Icsc board. Now, when it comes to recognition, you have NCERT that gives the recognition, or you have the recognition that is given by NCERT. Here you have Council for the Indian School Certificate Examination that gives you the certificate, or it's conducted by Cise. Now, the course content. Course content, when I say about CBSE, it's much more precise, it's much more factual in nature. However, Icsc is much more practical in nature and much more extensive and elaborate. When it comes to assessment, previously CBSE did not had internal assessment. Now both of them have internal assessment. However, there is higher weightage to lab work in case of Icsc in contrast to CBSE, where it's just the internal assessment based on the theoretical aspects. Coming on to teaching methodology. Teaching methodology, we can say, is much more factual in case of CBSE board. However, in Icsc, it's much more applicative. So if you are looking for competitive exams like NEET, JEE, then the content for the CBSE thoroughly matches it. But when it comes to Icsc, it's much more practical, much more applicative, and furthermore emphasis with detailed teaching. And moreover, here you have flexibility. You have flexibility in choosing your subjects. You don't have all compulsory subjects in contrast to CBSE, where all the subjects are compulsory at least for both 10th. Now, prevalence. This is a good question indeed. Prevalence, you have very high prevalence for CBSE board. In contrast to that, Icsc boards are comparatively less in number. How this all started? So CBSE is one of the major boards across the country following an NCERT curriculum. However, Icsc is an Indian version of the British IGCSE board, and that is what makes the two boards very different. Coming on to the regional areas, we can say the regions of Delhi have higher schools with CBSE in contrast to Mumbai, Kolkata, where you have very higher percentage or proportion of schools, Bangalore even, where you have very higher proportion of schools with Icsc curriculum. Now, marking scheme. When it comes to marking scheme, you have internal assessment as well as external assessment that we have seen. But marking scheme goes on and varies with the subject. So some of the group 3 marking in case of Icsc, you have 50% weightage for externals and 50% weightage for internals. However, for CBSE, most of them have 20% weightage. Also, you have the grade points that are given, and this is now in terms of the percentage marks for Icsc. However, CBSE of recent has changed its pattern. Coming on to transferability, CBSE is much more acceptable solution because most of the KVs or the Kendriya Vidyalayas where government employees, the central government employees kids are enrolled, have a uniform syllabus throughout the year. So even if in the mid session there is a transfer that takes place, it's very simpler for a student from CBSE to adjust to a new school. However, with Icsc this does not work. When it comes to range of subject, as we said, CBSE has fixed subjects for your grade 10th. However, Icsc has 3 subjects which are compulsory, which is English, the social studies part, and then you have a second language. However, for the others, you have the choices that are seen. Also, CBSE has very high weightage for science and maths. On the other hand, Icsc has equal weightage for science, social studies, and humanities or arts which is basically the languages part, we could say. And this is what makes it easier for students to clear TOEFL. Uh, Icsc is much more recognized globally. It's a kind of board which is acceptable on a global scenario. Coming on to syllabus and the depth of syllabus, so definitely the depth of syllabus is much more in depth for Icsc, specifically when it comes to languages. However, as we mentioned prior, Cbse has its main focus on science and maths, and there is lot of internal choices in the paper, which makes the question paper comparatively much more easier. Now, what are the pros and the cons for the Cbse and the Icsc? So, coming quickly to the pros and the cons for the Cbse board first. Now, Cbse, as we said, it is good for competitive exams. You have comparatively easy syllabus that is seen. The content is not very vast. Scholarships, a lot of scholarships are available. Students who are looking for private tuitions definitely get more opportunities with Cbse in contrast to Icsc. You have more number of teachers there. Less of syllabus is seen, but there are drawbacks. The drawbacks include there is lack of practical knowledge. So the practical and the applicative part is missing in Cbse. Most of the curriculum is based on theory, a very high focus on factual learning, and it is less relevant to the real life problems or the real life concepts. On the other hand, if we talk about Icsc, looking on to the pros and the cons, for the cons, we can say simply the most important is extensive syllabus. It can be burden for a lot of students. It's difficult to cope up. The checking is much more strict in case of Icsc board. Sometimes if we look onto the books, the schooling, it's relatively expensive in contrast to an average Cbse school. Positive aspects of Icsc are it is comprehensive. As we said, there is lot of practical training, good command on language that is seen, global recognition. You have TOEFL, which could be cleared easily with language being strong, and moreover, one of the major benefits is flexibility in subjects, which is not offered for Cbse curriculum, at least till grade 10th. Now, what is a calculated move? As a parent, as a student, it's really a tough time to decide which board to opt for, which board not to opt for. But before understanding this calculated move, let's first talk about a balance where both of these stand equal. So definitely the main subjects, the core subjects remain the same for both. So either you are going for Cbse or Icsc, it does not matter because you would be studying more or less the same content. The second is the quality is indeed good for both the boards, and there is not one-sided teaching, there is an interactive teaching which is part of both the curriculums. So that is something that is on an equal footage for be it a Cbse school or an Icsc school. Now as a parent, what could be a calculated move? As a child thinking about pursuing higher grade 10 or grade 12 in a Cbse or Icsc, what should be taken into account? First of all is your interest. The second is an exposure. So once you have the interest and an exposure, you can decide whether which board would be good for you. Those who are definitely looking for careers in social sciences or humanities and languages, Icsc is indeed a better option because you have more emphasis since the lower levels as well. One very important thing that you need to understand is it's not really sure that if a child is performing well in one board, he or she will do well or do equivalently good in another board. There could be drastic variation in the results that could be seen if the boards are getting switched. So be very careful if it is a switching of the board. It should be at a very early stage, not delayed, because as you delay, you are creating a burden for the child. The next important thing is, irrespective of the board, more or less the subject curriculum is same. One of the important differences is in CBSE, you have higher focus on the concepts related to India. However, in Icsc, specifically for social studies, if you would see, you would have higher emphasis on world aspects. So, world history, world geography is something that would be touched in Icsc. However, CBSE would be confining to Indian history, Indian geography, and that makes the picture a lot more different. So, we had a quick comparison of the two. It's right time to decide which board to opt for, and definitely you have the ongoing procedures for admissions that is already going on. So stay tuned with many more insights coming on board the content. And definitely, if you have any doubts, queries, feel free to reach us. You can either comment below or drop us an email to the email that is mentioned in the description below. Have a wonderful day.